Hi everyone, Elizabeth from As I Lay Reading here, reporting to you live from my car in the middle of a CVS parking lot as I start my journey over to New York City in order to check out the special exhibit on Caspar Friedrich at the Met. It's about a 3.5 hour drive from where I am in central Massachusetts, so I thought I'd bring you all along, and I'll see you as the vlog continues. It's funny that I'm passing through here because this is actually a spot with a lot of rocks on it, and there are lots of photos of me imitating the Wanderer over a Sea of Fog right at this spot. I didn't realize I was going to be passing it while I went out to New York, but so here's my Wanderer over a Sea of Fog spot. There's often a ton of fog up here. So isn't that lovely? Not quite all the way in leaf yet, but getting there up here. It's 5:30 p.m. and I'm right in downtown Hartford. Great timing. Wow, it smells amazing.
Show it to my baby brother. I can't. No.
Hi again, everyone. I'm back home in the middle of nowhere, just like I like it. And yeah, I've had a few days to digest everything that I saw in New York, and I thought I would do a little debrief here. So I realized that I never actually explained who Caspar David Friedrich actually is. He's a German painter from the early 19th century, a romantic. The exhibition itself at the Met was the first major American exhibition in the United States, so I was very excited about it. I've been a big fan of Caspar David Friedrich for a very, very long time, so that was something I really, really wanted to see. And it was totally worth the drive, I think. The exhibit itself did have The Wanderer Over a Sea of Fog and The Monk, which are two of his most famous paintings, but I was kind of disappointed that it didn't have The Abbey in the Oakwood, which is another one of his most famous paintings and one of my actually favorite paintings. But overall, it was a very good exhibition. It was cool to walk through and be able to see in chronological order sort of how Friedrich developed as an artist and different stages that he went through in his development. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, but when I was looking at more about Friedrich, I did notice that a lot of my sources seemed somewhat dismissive or apologetic. I didn't know that he apparently is not like an A-lister among painters, apparently. I've always known of him. And I was very surprised. So in my handy dandy Gardner's Art Through the Ages, Gardner takes a fairly tepid approach. It says it hardly has anything on him. And then it says, although Friedrich's works may not have the theatrical energy of the paintings of Géricault or Delacroix, they are pervaded by a resonant and deep emotion. And that's sort of damning with faint praise from Gardner's there, I felt. Then, when I was looking at my Gombrich, The Story of Art, Gombrich is even more negative about him. He says, there were certainly great artists among the Romantic painters of Europe, men such as Turner's contemporary, the German Caspar David Friedrich, whose landscape pictures reflect the mood of the romantic lyrical poetry of his time, which is more familiar to us through Schubert's songs. But however great and deserved was the popular success which some of these romantic painters achieved in their day, I believe that those who followed Constable's path and tried to explore the visible world rather than to conjure up poetic moods achieved something of more lasting importance. And finally, while I was in New York, I was sort of on and off reading this biography of Caspar David Friedrich. And even in his own biography, the introduction takes a very apologetic stance. It says, he is thought of most commonly, perhaps, as a painter of Gothic weirdness, of spooky silhouettes of barren trees and ruins rising against wintry skies, as in The Abbey in the Oakwood, the painting that I really like. Such pictures convey an exciting sense of the spiritual and reproduce well. Yet it should be remembered that Friedrich was also an artist of great subtlety, as can be seen in the charming painting of his wife in Woman at the Window. And even in his most fantastic works, he drew on observation. Both the ruin and the oak trees in The Abbey in the Oakwood are derived from detailed nature studies that can be found in his sketchbooks. So from these sources, it seemed to me that somehow the Geist has moved against Caspar David Friedrich a little bit. And I was surprised by that. I didn't know that. It seems to me that it's because he didn't paint directly from nature like other contemporaries of his who were painting landscape paintings. It seems that maybe there's a certain apologetic feeling that he didn't paint directly from nature, but instead created these sort of fanciful or overly dramatic paintings. But to that, I kind of say, balderdash. I mean, if you can have an odalisque with extra vertebrae, why can't you paint nature from your imagination? I don't really see any reason to think less of Friedrich for his flights of fancy than to think less of Van Gogh or Klimt or, any of these contemporary landscape painters, just because Friedrich didn't paint directly from observation. So I disagree vehemently both with the apologetics and with the sort of snobby, dismissive air I caught from some of the books I was looking at. I noticed also that you're sort of supposed to like The Monk more than The Wanderer Over the Sea of Fog. That's supposed to be his masterpiece. But for me, it's always been The Wanderer. And it's The Wanderer because is there another painting that sort of catches your breath so suddenly when you see it, that fills you with such yearning? It so clearly and evocatively communicates to us a very particular and difficult to transmit or to communicate human emotion. And I think that's sort of the beauty of the painting. And I don't think this is meant to be unfiltered nature. I think this is very clearly meant to express the landscape is meant to express a human feeling. This isn't nature unvarnished, but nature with a human gloss on it. And I think that's sort of the point. And to criticize Friedrich for not accomplishing what he never set out to do, I think is sort of is to miss the point. The other thing that I think is sort of interesting about The Wanderer is, of course, famously that the figure is turned away from us, which is apparently famously known as Rückenfigur, like back figure, I guess, so that you see the figures from the back. Most people interpret the role of the figure as a stand-in for ourselves in order to express the feeling of the romantic feeling of the sublime. So the sublime goes beyond just an appreciation of the beautiful, but it sort of expresses a kind of anxiety, almost a fear, a kind of awe in the face of something large, specifically large and overwhelming. So most of the time that I've seen, the sublime is the experience of nature that we have, where it's a kind of joy mixed with a kind of fear, as most famously expressed in Edwin Burke's writing, but also I think in Kant as well. I know they had some disagreement there. I don't know the details on that. And surely it's true that The Wanderer is definitely meant to express the romantic notion of the sublime. I think if you look up the sublime in like Wikipedia or something, you'll simply see a picture of this painting, The Wanderer over a Sea of Fog. Let me say that I think the Rückenfigur, or back figure, has a number of roles to play in the painting, and it has a number of roles in what makes the painting so interesting. The first is that it tells us that the figure has an internal world, because the figure is not just sort of displayed on a plate for us to be gazing at as an object, but the figure is actually not displayed ideally for us to see. It's facing away from us, thereby indicating that the figure isn't only there for us to appreciate or to look at, but that the figure is engaged in its own life, its own internal world. I think that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is that it does direct our gaze. So we want to look naturally where the figure is looking, and it gives to us a feeling of shared experience, because unlike most figures which are facing us in paintings, all of our lines of sight are in the same direction as the figures, and so we are having this shared experience with the figure in the painting, which I think is very different from most paintings that we look at, right? In most paintings, we're sort of looking back, or the figure is looking at us, or is at least displayed towards us in our direction. This aligns all of us, all of our gazes, all of the viewers and the figures in one direction into this vast vista of the mountains. But I think at the same time that we're having a shared experience with the figure, we also sort of naturally put ourselves into the figure's shoes. We feel that we are the figure at the same time. So there's this interesting feeling that we're both with someone, with the figure, having a shared experience, and that we are witnessing complete and utter solitude and harmony with nature between one single figure, one single person, which is ourselves embodied inside the figure, and nature. So I think that's an interesting sort of double function or double experience that the painting gives us. I think another sort of double experience is that we're both seeing at the same time just what the figure is seeing, more or less, but we also are seeing mostly the figure. So we're both looking at a landscape and we're looking at a portrait. And I think it's interesting that the painting is a portrait. It's not wide like a landscape, but it's up and down like a portrait. It's painted like a portrait. So it's a landscape and a portrait at the same time. We're seeing both a person and the landscape at the same time. And I think the last part of the double experience that I see, it's my subjective experience. Definitely this painting represents the sublime for most people, and possibly also for Friedrich. We don't know. He didn't tend to verbalize what he meant by his paintings most of the time, but it seems fairly uncontroversial to say that it's meant to evoke the sublime in us. For me, though, I think actually of one of my favorite poets, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and he lived after Friedrich, so there's no way that Friedrich was thinking of this, but it does inevitably remind me of Hopkins. In writing his poetry, Hopkins wrote about observations of nature with these two concepts of being or witnessing that he kept in mind when he was writing. One he called inscape, and the other he called instress. So inscape is sort of the inner structure, the fundamental being of an object. It's what makes an object that object. It's what is the very individuality of that object, the hidden structure of that thing that makes it that thing. And in stress is sort of this energy or power that is imbued in the air from the act of witnessing. And what I think is interesting about in stress is the idea that an object doesn't fulfill its sort of function or its sort of teleological purpose until it's witnessed. So every object needs both inscape and instress. And Hopkins meant this in the context of sort of a religious context. But for me, I think it still remains very interesting in terms of, even in a secular way, in terms of how we appreciate nature. That when we see a beautiful mountain range, there is something being added by the fact that we ourselves, human beings who are conscious, aware, and sentient, are witnessing that mountainscape. There's something to be said about that, and there's a sort of completion or something, there's a sort of completion to our witnessing those things, without trying to sound too mystical about it. I do find those two concepts very appealing. And when I see the wanderer over sea of fog, when I see the figure from the back looking upon this landscape, I can't help but think of Hopkins's idea of inscape and in stress. The inscape of that foggy vista and the in-stress of the figures witnessing of that vista, and maybe even in a sort of strange other layer, our witnessing of the witness of the witnessing of the landscape. I think that's what sort of fills it with this charged energy. It fills it, it makes it very different from just a landscape, because of course Friedrich could have just painted just the landscape, and we could have imagined ourselves in the we could have been positioned just where the figure of the painting is. But of course that would not have been the same at all if we ourselves were looking, so to speak, through the eyes of the figure without being able to see the figure at all. That would be a completely different painting. And I think the idea that there's something else gained by having the figure there is something that I find really interesting and intriguing. And it's something that keeps me coming back to this painting over and over again through the years. There's something so appealing about that, and yes, popular, as my books mention, and I think rightly so. There is something really almost entrancing about this painting. The last thing I wanted to touch on was, when driving 3.5 hours just to see a single painting, did raise the question for me, in this age of reproduction, what's the point of seeing a painting in real life? I've seen this painting 1,000 times in much higher definition than is in real life. I could zoom in on it infinitely. I have been able to contemplate it in privacy. It was rather crowded when I went there. I have many times been able to sort of look at it at my leisure when I felt like it, rather than driving several hours to go and see it. It was rather difficult to even commune with it because there were so many people there. I think some paintings lend themselves better to being seen in crowds, and some paintings don't so much. The Caspar David Friedrich paintings tend to be rather small in scale. They demand sort of close scrutiny, a more intimate and quieter encounter with them than many paintings, and that wasn't really afforded to me at the Met. I had to go on a Saturday, for instance, so it was very, very busy. So the question arises, why bother to see this in person? I mean, you can come up with rationalizations, I'm sure. I could see the colors more accurately than I can ever see in a print. I could see the crackling of the oil, the old oil surface. I could see it as close up as I wanted, but of course I was also sort of trying to squint through the reflections on the glass protection of the painting. So I don't think rationalizations like I could see more really work. Maybe you could say I saw the scale of it, I saw how large it was, but I think ultimately we have to be honest that it's not about the painting's details or something about gaining new information about the painting when you see the painting in person. I think it's more so about crossing paths with an object that has lived a certain life and feeling that you're in the same place as it physically, that you're in the same presence of this thing, that this thing now, which was abstract for you, actually truly exists for you now. And I think it's very much like reading all of Plato and still wanting to go to Greece and still being amazed when you find yourself in a place where the great master might have sat or spoken. It's about sharing space physically with the beloved object. I think that in this case, with this particular painting, it's particularly fitting because the painting itself demonstrates how place can move us. And I think I experienced that myself, that I was there in the room with this painting that existed for me in an abstract way for so many years, and suddenly in my mind has now become a concrete item that I actually went and saw, and I shared physical space with this painting. Whether that's enough to motivate other people to go see paintings in person, I don't know. But for me, that was a very important and moving experience for me. So I'm really glad I went and saw it. So one last announcement would be that I actually got these 2 postcards from the New York Public Library. I went to the Met too late, so I wasn't able to get postcards from the Met, but I got these postcards at the New York Public Library because I just love the lions that sit outside the New York Public Library. And initially I got these just from my own personal collection, but I saw that some people on YouTube, like I think Chris from Christopher Russell Reads, give away books and things to people who watch their channel. I thought that was really nice. So I thought if anyone's interested in having one of these 2 postcards mailed to them, I've made an email account that you can write to and just tell me which one you'd like. And if anyone's interested, I will mail out with a little personal message from me, a postcard from the New York Public Library. I think that would be nice. So, yeah, and I don't want to disadvantage anyone who comes to this video later. So let's just say 72 hours after this video is posted, if you email, I'll choose in the unlikely event that there's lots of demand. I'll just choose randomly from whatever I receive, and so I'll choose some lucky winners from this to receive these postcards. So yeah. And anyway, so that was my trip to New York. I had a great time, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. And yeah, I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.